Thank you so much, Chairman Cook. And I want to point out that Mr. Eddie Acevedo is in the audience. He's our former staff director for our Middle East and North Africa subcommittee. And he is now, listen to this fancy title, Deputy Assistant Administrator and Chief Legislative Strategist for the U.S. Agency for International Development. It started here and it went all the way to the back. They couldn't get it all in there. Welcome, Eddie. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask the panelists, about Colombia and the peace process and what will happen to the FARC and will they run for office, et cetera. And I've long been critical of aspects of this peace agreement with the terror group FARC, and particularly I've opposed allowing FARC members to run for political office. But under the current agreement, Colombian House and the Colombian Senate have guaranteed the FARC 5 seats in each chamber, and any of them can run for president. I believe that we have a moral obligation to the victims of the terror of the FARC, and allowing the FARC to hold power in Colombia's government before justice is served is just plain wrong. But whatever your views on that is, it's already a done deal. Is it possible, do you think, that the FARC could be using its illicit profits from its narco-terror activity to fund any electoral campaigns? Are you monitoring that? Have you heard of them, any problems? Are there indications that the FARC could be using fear and intimidation tactics in order to undermine the democratic process to its advantage?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. In the conversations that we have had with local partners in some of these more rural areas and post-conflict zones, that is a fear that the FARC does have increased control and increased influence, whether it be monetary or just with fear over some of the electoral processes, including the candidates. And while they themselves may not necessarily be running candidates under the FARC new party, they may be influencing some of the candidates running for office. And so, it is, I think, a fear that is shared among not just the local partners, but others observing the election, and something that we're looking closely. We don't have any official programming that is taking a look at that right now, although I think that is an excellent recommendation to support programming.
Well, thank you for putting it on your radar. I wanted to ask about the double standard when it comes to the OAS. In Honduras, the Secretary General took it upon himself to ask for new elections, while its own electoral observation mission and the European Union mission did not come to the same conclusion. Conversely, in Nicaragua, the OAS Electoral Observation Mission stated, quote, "The mission received 219 complaints that were forwarded to the Supreme Electoral Council," end quote. But the council is led by Roberto Rivas, who was just recently sanctioned by the U.S. For human rights violations, for corruption, you name it. So in Nicaragua, the OAS is asking the inmates to run the asylum, but in Honduras, the Secretary General is seeking new elections. Do you share any concerns about this double standard, and how do we make sure that there is a more uniform response at the OAS for these kinds of problems?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for the question. I think the question of double standards has always come up with regard to international responses to elections. Election observation is a tough job, and it's not unusual that you might find some differences between European Union international observations and OAS and international observation groups. I think the important thing is to press, to look at where we are right now and to press for improvements in both countries. I think, as I pointed out in my testimony, there are serious deficiencies in the case of the electoral system in Nicaragua. And the irregularities that occurred in the Honduras election, about which both the OAS and the EU agreed, were severe. So what to do? I think that there is need to move forward on political and electoral reform. There are some proposals out there, for example, from the Conference of Bishops inside Honduras to convene a constituent assembly. President Hernandez has called for a dialogue. Clearly, steps have to be taken to remove this cloud over the election.
Thank you very much, all of you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.